a commander in Pennsylvania who had been involved in several preparation meetings for other events like this with the Secret Service said to me, Miss Leonnig, I know your work, and I think you and I both know your grandma could have shot Donald Trump from this location. And that kind of put everything in perspective. If my grandma could shoot somebody from there, then why wasn't it secured?
All right, and we're back. I'm delighted to be here with, I think, my favorite Deadline White House partner, maybe. The person that I most want to listen to and shut up and stop talking when she comes on. It's Carol Leonnig, national investigative reporter at The Washington Post. She focuses on the White House and government accountability. She's also won 4 Pulitzer Prizes, no big deal, and her books include Zero Fail, The Rise and Fall of the Secret Service. That seems like a pretty relevant subject matter expertise this summer, Carol?
It was pretty relevant. I will never forget, Tim. By the way, I'm blushing. I like to shut up and listen to you, so this will be a difficult program for us. But I will never forget. I'd finished editing a story, a kind of a marathon story that's now been published, but we were in the middle of a pretty hairy story, and I had gone to take a nap because we had worked so late into the night and early in the morning. And my editor woke me up essentially with a call. Trump's been shot. We're going to need you to call all your sources, which is what I did for the next 48 hours without sleep. It was really just a stunning failure, which was sort of obvious from the get-go, like a billboard in front of your face. How could they not secure a huge roof 150 yards away from Donald Trump's stage?
So for those of us who haven't been following it closely, and I've followed it like Twitter and cable news amount, I did not watch like the hearings, etc. It's just such a gargantuan fuck up. And you had written a book, obviously, about some of the problems with the Secret Service. Like, how much of this was foreseeable, systemic, and how much of it was just a total brain fart on one afternoon?
I really like your choice of the word systemic. We don't know how many brain farts, so to speak, were involved in this cascade of failures, but we know that the preparation for this event is emblematic of a series of chronic failures. Every time there's a massive security gaffe by the Secret Service, I wrote about a string of them in 2013, 2014, 2015. Every single time there is that kind of huge breach, it's because the Secret Service is spread too thin and it's trying to do more with less. And it's been doing that since 9/11. And I was kind of gobsmacked that this assassination attempt unfolded the way it did, because it revealed a failure of Secret Service 101 since 1963, when John F. Kennedy was shot and killed from the 6th floor of a library book depository where Lee Harvey Oswald was standing with a long gun. Secret Service agents always prepare in outdoor events, in particular for line of sight. And here was such a stunning line of sight, Tim, that was so clear that a commander that horrible weekend when we were just calling every person we could, a commander in Pennsylvania who had been involved in several preparation meetings for other events like this with the Secret Service said to me, Miss Leonnig, I know your work, and I think you and I both know your grandma could have shot Donald Trump from this location. And that kind of put everything in perspective. If my grandma could shoot somebody from there, then why wasn't it secured?
So, okay, so we go back there, these failures in 2013, 14, 15, enough for you to write a book about this. Like, what has been then the holdup in the intervening decade? Like, this seems like this should be a bipartisan funding priority. Is it just bureaucratic rot? Is it Tea Party Republicans don't want to fund this? Is it like, what is it?
Gosh, I'm so glad you asked it that way. I mean, how can it be 10 years after a series of stories I wrote won the Pulitzer, right, for revealing humiliating security failures. A disabled vet able to get past 100 Secret Service officers and agents at the White House and inside the building. A man who had a messianic complex able to shoot at the White House and hit it 7 times, and the Secret Service didn't know that bullets had hit the most secure building in the world, allegedly, for 4 days until a White House butler discovered it. How can it be that 10 years after those stories, 10 years after President Obama named a blue ribbon panel that made 50 plus recommendations to streamline the Secret Service's mission, give it more resources, 10 years after a House oversight panel conducted a year-long investigation, made some of the same findings about systemic, I'm using your words, systemic, chronic weaknesses and vulnerabilities in the agency. Why didn't any president since, or Congress since, implement all of those? Well, let's ask Donald Trump. He was the president after these reports came in. He didn't drastically increase the Secret Service's budget. He didn't approve several of the steps that were recommended. Congress was all for cutting back spending generally in non-defense areas and didn't protect the Secret Service in terms of its funding. Let's ask President Biden. He was aware of some security failures on Donald Trump's watch and also did not make this a priority, nor did the Congress that he worked alongside. So you've asked just the right question, and now they should be answering it.
The Richie Torres is talking now about how, maybe another thing that could be done is take off a Secret Service's plate. I guess over the years they've gained some other responsibilities. I don't even know this, or looking at financial crimes, and instead, refocusing the entire effort on protection of presidential and other assets. Like, is that part of this? Was that part of being spread too thin, that they were starting to do other stuff?
Well, part of their mission all along and how they were founded really in 1865 was to investigate counterfeit funds, which were then as much as 2/3 of the paper currency in in trade in the United States during the Civil War. So that was how they were founded, not to protect presidents. But it's true that financial crimes have become a larger, and cybersecurity threats have become a larger and larger portion of their work. And on top of that, Tim, they're being asked to protect nearly double the number of people that the Secret Service has normally protected prior to 9/11. After 9/11, all of a sudden, Secret Service details were assigned to cover Vice President Cheney's grandchildren and sons-in-law, and the extremely large and expansive Bush family and their children and grandchildren. And the same has been true when Donald Trump was president. A huge number of family members that were getting protection that hadn't been prior, and additional senior government officials that hadn't gotten protection before, largely because of amped up threats against the executive. When the president is being threatened online, you'll often find that his chief of staff, his national security advisor, and deputy White House chief of staff even are starting to get protection because, well, it's warranted. Unfortunately, the Secret Service has never gotten the manpower, human power, training, resources to add all of that to its mission.
Fascinating. One more. I was starting to think about which Bush family members I want to cut as we start to do this budget, but I don't want to get in trouble with any of my pals. The going back to Butler, like the other thing, and maybe this is outside your bailiwick, but the other thing that just continues to stick in my craw is I don't feel like that there has been great transparency, like either from the Secret Service or the FBI about all of this. I mean, and there was the hearing that I referenced, but why, have we not had the type of briefings and the fallout from that attempted assassination and the killing, really, of the people in the audience that you have for other similar situations?
Yeah. People who try to assassinate presidents and prominent government officials, in this case, a former president, the Secret Service has done an intense study of people who try to knock off our presidents. And what they found was that they're often not politically motivated. They're often essentially very mentally strained and challenged, and they are looking for attention and validation, attention and affirmation like they haven't had in their lives. You'll remember John Hinckley was trying to impress Jodie Foster, an actress who was very popular at the time. Arthur Bremer, who tried to kill Nixon and then ended up shooting George Wallace and paralyzing him for life, was also just a bullied kid who'd never had any success in his life and had struggled with girlfriends and wanted to get attention. Part of the reason that I tell you this little boring story about assassins and would-be assassins is the FBI is frustrated. They don't have an Arthur Bremer diary. They don't have John Hinckley's writings of why he tried to kill Ronald Reagan. They don't know why crooks tried to kill Trump yet. And I think that that is a source of great frustration to them. So on transparency, it's going to be a little while before they're talking very much about this. The Secret Service acting director, he doesn't want to step in the manure pile that the previous director, Kimberly Cheadle, did. You know, she had to resign essentially after several significant missteps in the optics of how she handled this. She had her detractors inside the agency. There was no question about that. But her defenders eventually ended up concluding that the way she had said things involved serious inaccuracies. I'm chasing my words here a little because a colleague of mine and I broke the story that she had said very affirmatively that the Trump detail had never been denied any requests for additional assets on campaign events or other security events where they were concerned about his safety. And we were able to establish that that was patently false and that they'd been denied numerous times. It was just such an obvious error that she could have avoided. And the acting director is not going to step into that.
Just disastrous. All right, I could do a whole hour on this, but people just need to read your work on all the Secret Service backstories in the Washington Post, because we have to talk about the Egypt story that you also were working on, which we have discussed on this podcast. But since you were the one that broke it, I've got a few follow-ups for you. The short of this, for people who don't remember, is that essentially Donald Trump's campaign had been asking him for $10 million to put into ads. His advisors had late in the 2016 campaign. He kept saying no. He met with Sisi, leader of Egypt, on the sidelines of a UN conference, and then 5 weeks later, he decided to put in $10 million into the campaign. The staff, nobody really knew why. It was later discovered that at an Egyptian bank, $10 million in U.S. currency was taken out and put into bags, and then the story kind of goes dry. So maybe add on anything I missed there on the summary for people.
This was a really hard story to wrap our arms around and confirm. It was a really hard story to do for the same reason it made the Department of Justice and FBI jaws kind of slack open when they were alerted by the CIA in late 2016, early 2017, about intelligence from an informant. The informant, this of course was classified at the time, the informant basically had high-level intelligence and information that Sisi was seeking to get this $10 million illegally to Donald Trump. And what stunned the FBI and the DOJ is that they could see corroboration for that informant's information in other intelligence that had been gathered by the US government. In other words, other people, I need to be careful how I say this, but other people were aware of Sisi's efforts and were trying to accomplish his instructions. And then the pièce de résistance, Mueller, who takes over this investigation in the middle of 2017 at the instruction of the Deputy Attorney General, because it certainly involves the possibility of a sitting president taking money from a foreign government and being compromised by the government of Egypt. Mueller fights to get bank records for a spy account, essentially. The Egyptian government has a very powerful spy agency, and the spy agency was alleged to be basically the tool to get the money to Trump. So Mueller fights to get those bank records, and as he is closing up shop, he finally wins in a sealed case that goes all the way to the Supreme Court. Nobody ever knows anything about it, at the time anyway. Gets the records that show a $10 million cash withdrawal from this spy account. And it's all in US dollars, $100 bills, not something there were a lot of in the Egyptian banking system.
Right.
But here they were able to get 200 pounds worth in a duffel bag. Finding those records made the FBI and the prosecutors who then proceed with the case after Mueller closes shop just sort of gobsmacked. Like, okay, we've got intelligence that an informant said Sisi wanted to do this. We've got corroborating intelligence that shows people trying to follow through on Sisi's instructions, the president of Egypt's instructions. And now we have a document showing that 5 days before Donald Trump became president, Sisi's spy agency whisked $10 million in US cash out of its bank accounts. The fury inside the department was they could not get the US attorney and ultimately the attorney general, Bill Barr, to sign off on subpoenas to figure out, did that cash ever land in Donald Trump's bank accounts?
So he kills the case just by essentially not approving efforts to subpoena for more information. Is that the gist of it?
He doesn't kill it with, a bazooka.
Right.
What Bill Barr does when he hears about this is he is briefed by the U.S. attorney in the District of Columbia, who's riding herd on this case now, has sort of caught that ball from Mueller as he's walking out the door. And the U.S. attorney, Jesse Liu, is telling the attorney general, this is what's going on with the sitting president, and this is what my prosecutors and FBI agents want to do. Barr has reservations. He has doubts, and he shares those with her and also instructs her to go to the CIA, make sure that there's a predicate for investigating this in the first place. Look at the underlying intelligence, he tells her. I've got my doubts. I've got some concerns about whether or not this case is warranted or if it's a fishing expedition. He does one more other thing, which is he goes to, in a private meeting with the FBI director, Chris Wray, expresses grave reservations about this case and says he's worried that agents who rolled off the Mueller probe are hell-bent on getting Donald Trump's bank records, and he's got suspicions about them and their motives. And he tells Wray he wants him to impose, quote unquote, some adult supervision on this case. Prosecutors and agents involved in this confide to their colleagues and to their friends, close allies, that this set a chilling effect. Essentially, Jesse Liu, who had been interested in this subpoena for Trump's bank records to trace the money, did it ever get back to Trump? Did they have a sitting president who was now a national security threat and had taken a bribe? That was the question. They saw her as interested in this until she talked to Barr, and then she was a no. Later, Barr installs 2 other acting U.S. attorneys after he forces Liu out of the office, and they both stall the case indefinitely and then shutter it permanently.
All right, I've already taken too much of your time, but lastly, so what now? I mean, you've written the story. Could other people investigate it, or as a closed case? Like, where does it go from here?
It could have been reopened under Merrick Garland, and for some reason it wasn't. It had another year on the clock. There are people who've reached out to us, sources, who say they believe that while the statute of limitations technically expired at the beginning of 2022, January 2022, 5 years for bribery, 5 years for illegal campaign contributions. They believe that there's the possibility of a 10-year statute of limitations, depending on the facts that could be gathered in this case, because a lot of facts were not ever gathered because prosecutors and FBI agents were blocked from doing that.
Right.
It's unclear what the facts will show.
What about Congress? Could Congress subpoena? Right? There's statute of limitations isn't a problem there.
Congress could. The Senate, controlled by Democrats, could. The House, not controlled by Democrats, probably is not too eager to figure out what happened with Donald Trump's bank accounts and whether or not he took money from Egypt.
Fascinating. And for those who don't remember, it was always noteworthy. It always piqued my interest that Trump called Sisi my favorite dictator. Trump has a lot of dictators he likes, so it's interesting he called Sisi his favorite one. Carol Leonnig, you're a national treasure. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for all your reporting on both of these stories. Come back soon, and I'll see you with Nicole in the next couple of days, I'm sure.
That's great. Thanks, Tim.